for joining us today in our continuing series following the developments of our ever-changing environment. And today we have a spectacular topic being hosted and spoken by Gary Farro with First Republic Bank and Andrew Luftig. So thanks to you both for joining us today and speaking on the topic of financing that I know is both critically important and on everyone's minds as we think about how to get deals to the closing table, how buyers can continue to purchase real estate in a curious environment. So thank you guys for volunteering your time and expertise on this matter. Without any further ado, Andrew, do you want to lift off?
Sure. Good morning. I hope everybody's doing well. Every day seems to get a little better. We seem to get a little stronger as far as work-wise. I guess a few silver linings just to kind of discuss briefly. I'm right now hiding in my basement, but fortunately my 4 kids are upstairs with my wife, and I get to pop up and down every few hours to kind of say hello. I do hide more than I run up there, just when there's screaming, yelling, crying, probably all the above. My wife's might be losing her mind, but it's nice to be so close. My partner Alan has 3 older daughters, and he's having dinner with them every night. He's never done that before. We both live in the suburbs, commute to the city. We all work long hours. So, there's a nice part. I think also this whole Zoom concept is amazing, right? I can scroll through, and I encourage everybody else to scroll through the cameras. And first, I imagine 99% of you have never seen me in street clothes and, without a suit and tie. So there's a human element to all this, right? And I think I know we all need that right now. I've been doing, 3 to 5 Zoom meetings a day. We have Zoom meetings with our staff every morning. It's cool just to see, where people are, and just to see, their apartments, and see that they're human. I know most of you run through, your offices without, saying hello to each other. Everybody's busy, everybody's focused. But it's nice to, connect this way. And I encourage you, I've been doing this with friends. Everybody's doing, cocktail hours. Some people are doing poker, friends, colleagues, definitely, clients as well. And just simply, the other weekend, I've been doing it pretty much every weekend, just text messaging everybody in my, text message chain, and just connecting, saying hello, and seeing where the conversation goes. Nothing more, nothing less. Some conversations end after a minute. Some conversations, go on they're still going on weeks later. I think now, Gary and I were talking about it. We've been working 12, 15-hour days on the phone, emails, nonstop. Things, fortunately and unfortunately, I think we're getting used to it, and we're getting smarter, and it's creating more time. So I'm able to, connect with people. But for you as brokers, obviously, while being sensitive, we all need to be sensitive. Everybody, all of us, we're in sales, just like you are. We need to position ourselves now for when this ends. It will end at some point. I think, when Cuomo says we can go back to work, in a week or 2 weeks, it's going to be too late, right? You're not going to scramble around and start getting things done that quickly. I think it's all about consistency and being strong. And, you are the professional, right? You are the doctor. You are the lawyer. People want to hear from you, whether it's just for emotional comfort or for, real factual information. We were having our busiest year ever by far, before this all happened. Bankers were the same way. So, New York's resilient, right? We went through Hurricane Sandy, 9/11, market crashes. Hopefully, there's a pause, and hopefully things get back, a lot quicker in New York, than ever before. I think there's going to be a ton of pent-up demand. I think clients want to hear from you and hear what you have to say, and you can definitely put things in motion now. And again, more importantly, just be a resource. So that's my 2 cents about kind of the world and what I'm seeing. But it's important. We're having ups and downs. It's kind of, I lock myself in the basement, and then you turn on the news, and it's difficult. But our little real estate bubble, we have a community, right? And I think it's important to embrace the community and help each other, and just brainstorm. I had a Zoom meeting last Saturday with 15 other attorneys. Just talking about, the deals and what we're seeing, how we're negotiating deals. And, no one, how it is, the regular transactional attorneys, we're not trying to hurt each other. We're trying to protect our clients, and, it should be a amicable deal. Talking about, time of the essence of what we're seeing. So So getting to kind of the topic at hand, financing. Just remember, everybody, there's a chat box on the bottom. So if you scroll your mouse down or your pad, you can type in. I guess I'll start off and then let Gary, we'll pop back and forth. But everybody knows about a basic pre-corona contingency. Just I'll make it very quick just to make sure we're all on the same page. Pre-corona contingencies, right? Buyer signs a contract. They normally have 30 days to get a commitment. If they get a commitment, usually there are conditions on the commitment. Some conditions relate to them personally. Some relate to the building. Pre-corona contracts, and you have deals in this world that haven't closed yet that are pre-corona contracts, of course. If the bank doesn't fund the loan for a reason relating to the purchaser's financials, proof of employment, assets, gift money, the buyer takes the risk pre-corona on themselves, which is a scary proposition, of course, in today's world. So a practical element, if a buyer can close, but they're saying, hey, I don't want to close, I want to see how things play out. If they can close and they don't have funding protection, meaning after the commitment was issued, I would highly encourage them to close, right? They're playing with fire. If they're going to, they may be able to renegotiate, but they also may lose their deposit. I spoke to a teacher the other day who said, listen, my job is secure. I'm not worried about it. So I want to sit back and wait. I don't want to close right now. Fine. Let's talk about the current environment, and this is, very standard, very reasonable under the conditions. We are getting full funding language. This means essentially the buyers are not taking any risk on financing from contract signing to closing. So again, a contingency means if you don't get a commitment for any reason up front, you're protected. You get your money back. Once they get a commitment, they're still protected, whether it relates to them, the building, or the lender. So that's the positive aspects. Buyers, of course, have a lot of negotiating power now. And it's important to explain to them that they are protected, to give them the comfort level to hopefully transact. Are we doing new deals? Yes. Is the volume down substantially? Of course it is. I've done deals sight unseen. I've done deals investment properties, but we are getting a lot of protection. Quick question from Ian. Good morning. Has anyone had a lender not issue a loan due to perceived lesser value and the buyer's putting down 20% or less? Perceived lesser value of the property or an issue with the buyer's financials? Gary, you want to chime in while we're...
Sure. We haven't personally. I assume that possibly some banks have taken a step back, but after a commitment, I don't think it's even possible. It all depends on what the appraised value comes in at. A lot has been changing on underwriting, and I'll jump into that in a minute, particularly for a lot of the major banks. But I'll allow you to finish first, Andrew, and then I'll jump in and kind of go through underwriting standards.
Just talking, a few concepts that have been thrown around. Renegotiating. If your clients are in a position to renegotiate or want to renegotiate, first, my 2 cents on renegotiating. A seller shouldn't entertain it unless the buyer is ready to close, right? The deals that we've had renegotiated are the ones where everybody's ready to close and we can actually close, right? The building's allowing it, everybody's allowing it. The problem is if you negotiate now as a seller and the buyer's not ready to close, doesn't want to close for a few months, we worry about the buyer retrading, right? Renegotiating. But my point, alluding to Gary, every deal's different, right? And taking a step back, and I think this is the biggest mantra, every deal, every client, every situation in today's world must be, analyzed very carefully. Every situation is different. Sometimes it's okay to not have the answer. I don't have all the answers, right? Things are moving. It's a moving target. We're getting more answers for sure as the days go on. But every deal is different. So what do I mean by that regarding financing? Your client has the ability to renegotiate. You have to speak to the lawyer and the banker first to see if they can renegotiate, right? If you're financing 80%, your negotiation power may be limited. How much credit can you get? If you're all cash condo deal, you can negotiate as much as you want. Co-op versus condo, 80% versus 50%, there's different parameters. So you must speak with the bank. Unfortunately, I've had situations where, respectfully speaking, the brokers are negotiating. I'm talking to the attorney about a time of the essence letter, and they're negotiating the purchase price, and it becomes, a little bit of a mess. So in today's world, over communicating is critical. We all know the successful brokers all communicate, are accessible, responsive, and communicate. That's your skill set. In today's world, like, over communicate, make sure everything is insanely buttoned up. Gary, thoughts?
So why don't I jump in from there and go over a little bit about underwriting standards today and how things have changed due to the coronavirus and ultimate biggest downfall of the stock market in its entire history for the first quarter. So let's talk about underwriting first. I received a bunch of questions that I'll hope to answer for you in the next 10 minutes when I kind of go over an overview. But the first is underwriting standards have not changed for us. We are still going to be relatively conservative. We're not going to be the 90% lender, but I don't think there really is any 90% lenders left. There is some concern by banks on what the valuations of properties are and where they will be when all of this shakes out. I tend to agree with Andrew's comment earlier. I think there will be a lot of pent-up demand, which will stabilize the market. But a lot of that is hearsay, and banks right now are dealing with a tremendous amount of calls incoming from people who just can't work right now that are asking for deferment of payments or asking for some type of relief on their payments. So let's go quickly about the overview. So underwriting, LTVs, where are they at today and what does that look like? For First Republic, we've pared back a little bit on second home purchases. Nothing really on primary residences. Our second home purchases, we're looking at maybe 5% lower than what we did before, dramatic. And we're willing to give rate for that. So, we find that most of our clientele, a 5% swing either way is not going to matter, but it's given a lot more comfort to our credit teams. I've heard across the industry that, most banks are paring back on that. The second thing to think about, and this is something you should think about for even deals you have in contract right now, is liquidity. Most people aren't going out and spending a fortune right now or when they're anticipating buying something, but if they have money tied in the market, as I mentioned a minute ago, the first quarter was the worst quarter ever in market history. So someone could have the assets that they needed and be relatively tight in December when they sign a contract, or January or February even, and now not have enough post-loan liquidity because the value of their portfolio went down substantially. So make sure you're having those conversations with anyone who's signing contracts or has contracts to make sure that they're protecting those funds and making sure they maintain enough liquidity to present to the bank at the time or prior to closing. Next thing to think about that I think is really important is appraisals. How are we doing today? I know Cuomo spoke last night and said that this is something that can resume, that we can do appraisals again, you can do open houses again, but that does not mean that sellers of properties are going to still want people in their homes. And that does not mean that the actual appraisers themselves are going to want to go to these homes. Remember, they have to get into an elevator, they have to hit buttons, they have to go up. It's not just walking in from outside. We're not the traditional real estate marketplace in New York City. And by the way, co-ops might not let anybody in, regardless of what Cuomo said. So we have to think about that. So how is First Republic doing it? We're doing desktop appraisals. So we're using various different forms of information that we can get off of the internet. We're using, obviously, recent sales, and we have professional appraisers that are putting together valuation models. How can that help you? How can that hurt you? It helps you because it's a very quick turnaround time. I mean, those things are done in a matter of hours, not a matter of weeks sometimes when you think about a regular appraisal. How could it hurt? If the valuation of the property has a lot to do with the internal contents that you're not going to have someone viewing. So if someone's done up the inside of their apartment very substantially with beautiful finishings, you may not see the benefit of that unless you have recent photographs to share with the firm that they can use for the appraisal, for the desktop. I don't think Cuomo's comment last night is going to get appraisers to run back into homes right now. I think that it's going to take a little bit of time, and there's going to have to be some confidence that people are feeling safe to enter into other people's space. Couple other things to think about on the appraisal piece is new buildings. New apartments, there's not going to be a lot of information outside of potentially the pictures that were taken for a listing. It's time to be creative. If in fact, and what we've asked in many cases is if the internal contents of the apartment and the internal structure make it unique and make it special, make sure you're sending pictures, take some internal photographs, and if in fact you will be in the apartment, if no one else is, ask the potential seller or someone lives there to do that as well. Those things can all add value to the appraisal process, which again, I don't think is going to change really, really soon. To take one step back on underwriting, far as First Republic is concerned, we're business as usual. All of us are set up at home. We're all set up with the exact same equipment that we have in our offices. I'm sitting in front of 3 screens right now with the phone from my desk in my office in New York City. And I have, as Andrew alluded to earlier, I have calls with my team all day long, Zoom calls where we're going through, various different documents, doing underwriting, putting together approvals. This is not a time for a bank to step back. This is a time for a bank to step up and be there for all of their clients, and that's exactly what we're doing. I'll stop there because I just threw a lot of information out and maybe see if there's any other questions. I've tried to answer ones that were given to me prior, but maybe I can open it up there and see if there's any questions on that.
Everybody know the chat on the bottom? If you scroll down to the bottom of the screen, there's a chat box. Type in your questions. What's going on with, I know your volume was, through the roof, pre all of this. How, should we give clients expectations? Buildings are, giving approvals, right? They're doing virtual board packages, virtual interviews, and sometimes the building's ready before the bank is these days. Is that, should we tell clients, to, take a deep breath and understand that it may take a little bit longer? What, how are you seeing
Yes, that's great question and a great comment too. Yes, we've moved to a standard 90-day lock. That's going out for every client that we do. Typically, as many of you know, we turn deals in 30 days to 40 days. Right now, we're probably at a 60-day, and that's due to volume. Right now, we're working on record volume, frankly, for a number of reasons. The first is the refinance market is still great. The second is, every person that wanted to close wants to close immediately. So we've got a ton of incoming business in the first quarter that was expected to close now and is getting delayed for obvious reasons. But banks right now are receiving record volume of refinances. And that has slowed down the process, and in fact has made some lenders actually even raise their rates. We actually moved ours up a little bit just to slow it down a little bit because the volume was insane. But banks across the board have raised rates from a simple perspective of supply and demand.
Yeah, just
go ahead, Andrew.
Just the reality. If we're all working from home, and I'm efficient, I have everything set up. I have the same idea, but I'm not as efficient, right? I'm not as quick. The little things take a little bit longer. So just think about, these, and not everybody has, set up perfectly. So the banks, you're trying to get documents out or trying to, put stuff together. So it's just reality. I'm sure everybody appreciates it, but sometimes, again, communicating that to your client and explaining that, the reality of it is important. But the e-notary is a life changer for New York, right? For the banks, for our purchase and sale deals. We have somebody, the title closers, talking about title vests are a lifesaver as well, right? We have somebody who's driving around the city, keeping distance from everybody, but just with his notary, picking up documents, dropping them off, notarizing. So that's how things are getting done, whether it's refis or financing deals. It's a process. Just so you know, the closings, instead of taking 2 hours, they're taking all day, sometimes 2 days, right? the schedule of closing, just some practical, some information, please, 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 everybody wants to close, everybody's lined up, or we think everybody wants to close, and we get a clear to close from approval from the co-op or the condo. Let's just make sure everybody first can close, everybody wants to close, everybody's clear to close. Because the reality, and this is, I'm being a hypocrite because I always, push you guys to be proactive, and the top brokers are, pushing, which we do the same thing, and we like to, keep up with that pace. But in today's world, we must make sure everything is buttoned up perfectly tight, because it's taking hours to schedule closings. These transfer agents, these managing agents, are just, overwhelmed. They can't figure things out for the most part. So we can take 4 hours to try to schedule a closing. Then all of a sudden somebody, says, hey, I'm really not ready. I'm sorry. We just wasted literally 4 hours of time. So we're, everybody's patient, everybody's figuring it out. But before you're too proactive, make sure everybody is lined up for success. We want to set this up for success, not for failure, and repeat the effort.
Hey, Andrew, I see a couple questions came through, and I'll just read them off. From Steve Dawson, we've heard that banks are doing voice verification of employment right before closing. Are you seeing that? That becomes an issue when no one is around. We've addressed that. We're trying to get that done as soon as possible in the process. But we're also willing to, if we can't get a hold of someone because no one's available, we're willing to take an email. We're willing to do, various other things to make sure that that person's still employed. And we're not necessarily stepping away just because there is, a furlough or something of that nature. Here's one for you, Andrew. Is there anything happening to permit tenants to delay paying rent temporarily without penalty?
Say that again? Is there anything
happening to permit tenants to delay paying rent temporarily without penalty?
Yeah, so next session, I'm actually going to bring on I have a landlord-tenant guru, so he's fielding questions and emails. And if you want to get in touch with him before then, certainly let me know, email me, and I'll connect you. But yeah, right now, it's everybody's got to play ball. Everybody has to be reasonable. There's a moratorium, 90 days on evictions. So what we're encouraging landlords and both tenants is to communicate. I think a lot of your clients have probably received, it's interesting and it's unfortunate, emails from landlords saying, hey, they're kind of desperate. They're saying, you may not be able, and this isn't the, individual condo, landlord, or it may be, but it's mostly the bigger landlords saying, hey, we have to pay our taxes. We have to pay our insurance. We have, we're not getting, relief yet, or maybe they're working on it. So, please pay your rent. But there's nothing they can do. The courts are closed, right? You can't get, court intervention unless it's a really emergency measure. And this is not an emergency measure. So, I encourage, tenants to, pay what they can. The landlords are typically accepting it. Doesn't mean it's waived. It means, you owe it on the back end. And in reality, what's going to happen? It depends how aggressive the tenants are, whether the landlord eventually will come after them, right? Say it's a $5,000 a month lease. Think about the practical aspect. If the tenant says, listen, I can pay half of it, and they do that for 2-3 months, the big landlords, may go after, may sue because they have attorneys on retainer, right? They have landlord-tenant attorneys that are, in court every day, all day. The more of the condo individual unit owners may not do that because it's not worth spending, $5,000 to get $5,000, obviously. Anna was asking everybody to utilize the raise hand function.
Yes. And before we deviate too far from a concept you had brought up earlier, we actually have Brian Tormey on the line, who is going to give us a little bit of color to the RON and AVON mechanisms, the remote notary mechanisms. Brian, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, happy to be here and excited to see all this good stuff happening. Andrew and Gary, excellent commentary, and thank you for doing this. Just to touch on the topic of remote notarization, Governor Cuomo issued about 2 weeks ago now, Executive Order 202.7, which authorized the use of audiovisual technology like this Zoom functionality for doing what normally would be a notarization done in a personal appearance, meaning you would be sitting with the notary or the attorney to notarize you, physically present with them. And he authorized the execution of it over an audiovisual protocol. Therewith, Governor Cuomo's executive order laid out several specific requirements in order to achieve a legal method of notarization while not being physically present with each other. Additionally, on top of that, and so with that, some people have been going and getting documents notarized for many types of transactions as well as real estate transactions. They're getting them done in this fashion, having just read the requirements in Governor Cuomo's executive order. However, it's very important, and you all as professionals who are guiding your customers and clients in these things, to help remind them that the lenders have specific requirements as it relates to what they're willing to accept, as do the title insurance underwriters and such as ourselves, as well as the county clerks. And there are additional requirements that need to be met. I won't go into all the specific details on this. We had a webinar earlier this week with about 500 and some people on it, sort of going through all those protocols and things. We're happy to send out some details to all of you as well in the NYRAC membership. But suffice to say, there are several additional protocols. Make sure that the right kind of platform is being used if you're having transactions in any way notarized using that. What it is very different from RON, which is remote online notarization. What Governor Cuomo has authorized is AVON, audio, video, online notarization. So anyway, just a quick snippet there. I don't want to take around too much time from Andrew and Gary's great content. I just wanted to touch on that we are seeing transactions and things where people think they've properly gotten it notarized, and then they did not. They used FaceTime and just did a notarization, or they recorded a video of someone signing it and sent it to the notary, and the notary stamped it, and then we're coming back a day later and saying, you can't close, we need to redo that thing you just thought you did. That was not sufficient. So please help share with people. There's some misleading intel out there on the internet regarding this audiovisual online notarization. Thanks.
Thank you.
That's excellent. Thank you, Brian.
So I see a few more questions. Lindsay, the big concept is, can you compel somebody to close? I had a nice, I'm being facetious, phone call with somebody, an attorney last night, who said, Andrew, your firm's closing deals, which we are, fortunately, every day, you represent the banks, but now you're telling me you don't have to close this deal because this buyer doesn't want to close. 100%. That's my argument, and that's, I've, of course, brainstormed, consulted with other, real estate, attorneys that, the 10 firms that, we do the bulk of the deals in the city. How can you compel somebody to do a virtual closing, a virtual walkthrough? Let's talk about walkthroughs. There's only so much you can get on your iPhone, right? And first of all, talking about virtual walkthroughs, please, please, please protect yourself, right? Clients are your best friend until they're not. The super does the walkthrough. The doorman does the walkthrough. They're going to blame you. There's a scratch on the floor. We all know floors are as is. They're going to come after you. So I know you don't like to send the emails, the lawyer emails, because you want love and you don't want to make this, you want to keep the relationships, you want to make everybody happy. But people are going to cut corners in today's world, right? Just to get deals done. And we have so many sophisticated, clients that are going to come after you. They don't care. They don't care that you busted your behind to get this done. And in 6 months, they're going to remember and they're going to come after you. So you have to be careful. Also, today's world, and it sounds atrocious to say this, fraud is very common, right? So be careful. I had a broker who we cut the check for them from the closing. They said, email me a copy of the check, text me a copy of the check. We cannot do that without crossing out all the numbers, because we all know that checks can be deposited virtually these days, right? So every little thing, if you get an email from somebody, or tell your clients, like you should, again, be the professional. Hey, if you get a weird email from the attorney, from anybody, call them, right? Because wire fraud, we represent many banks. We have 15 different escrow accounts. We are super careful, right? Our accounting department is really dotting their I's and crossing their T's. So my answer to closings, which has been 100% successful so far, I've not got a time of the essence letter yet. I'm sure eventually it'll happen. If you're not supposed to leave your home, right, how can you do a closing? Yes, there are options, but you can't be compelled. Oh, this is critical. Let's talk, from a legal standpoint. Everybody knows a contract closing date normally for resales is on or about 60 days for financing, on or about 30 days for a cash deal. What you never realize is on or about actually has legal significance. On or about means either party is entitled to a reasonable adjournment. Case law actually says, and industry standard says, on or about a reasonable adjournment is 30 days. We are not in a reasonable world right now. We don't know what a reasonable in German is today. Is it 30 days? Is it 90 days? I think once, we're allowed to go back to work and everybody's allowed to go back to work, then, sellers can start to compel buyers to close, by serving that time of the essence and giving 30 days notice. So I don't think, anybody can compel anybody to close. And and I had a conversation, and again, with another attorney, it's almost like, I use this line, I'm usually a lover, not a fighter, but today's world, you have to kind of stick up for clients when you feel like, people are taking advantage. I said, send me the letter. I'll send it to the New York Times. I'll send it to the Real Deal. Right. I mean, it's insane. Listen, but at the end of the day, clients, as attorneys, clients make business decisions. So if a client, tells us that we have to do this, the reason I said that, I wouldn't say it to someone in our world, our industry. It was a litigator. So I knew, maybe he was doing it because he can, make a little bit more money. So I don't think anybody, I wouldn't have said that to a friendly competitor, but this guy was clearly a litigator that was taking advantage.
Hey, Andrew, why don't I jump in? I got a
Yeah.
list of questions that came
Sure.
across about the payroll protection program. So let's talk about you individually now. The SBA has put out two programs, the EIDL, which is a disaster loan program, which is not forgivable, and the payroll protection program. And the payroll protection program is, I believe, right in many of your wheelhouses. If you have employees and you have staff that you intend to maintain, regardless of how this drags out and how it impacts your income, it's a no-brainer. It's actually free money because the way it works is, as of tomorrow, you'll be able to apply. Wherever you maintain your business accounts is the best place to apply. And the way it works essentially is this. Now, I will put this caveat out. I know enough to be dangerous, but I am not a complete expert on SBA financing. But I will tell you my understanding. So First Republic is a participating bank if, in fact, you do have business accounts with us. As I mentioned, you should do it directly through whomever your business accounts are with now. And assuming you have less than 500 employees, which I assume every one of you does, you can apply. And the way they're going to look at it is as follows. They're going to look at up to 2.5 months worth of salary, assuming each employee is capped at $100,000. The amount you can borrow can include funds for rent, not your personal rent, any type of business rent, leases, as well as utilities. And assuming you maintain the same headcount and do not reduce the salaries over a specific time period, that loan becomes forgivable. The rate is 0.5%, and it needs to be paid back within 2 years. The first payment that is due is deferred for 6 months. Interest does accrue during that time period. However, once again, if you can show that you did not fire anyone and you maintain the same headcount and did not reduce salaries, that loan can in fact be forgivable. The window is opening up, as I mentioned, tomorrow for you to apply. There is a limited bucket of money for the entire country, and it's at $349 billion, I believe. Sounds like a big number, but I would guess that'll be taken up in the first 48 hours of being able to apply. Banks are going to be rushing to push this through, which is part of the volume that we've had. I've already had 75 requests for this type of loan, and I'm one banker. So think about going across the country and how many people are actually going to be requesting this. So if this is something you do want to pursue, I highly recommend going to the government website today, sba.gov, getting in there, reading about the PPP, Payroll Protection Program. There's an application on the website. It's minimal documentation. There's no personal guarantee, and there's no collateral. So it's going to be pretty easy to underwrite and pretty easy to turn around what's necessary. All you have to have is basically your payroll information. If you're going to use any utility information or have your own office that you lease, you can put that information together as well. But I would start preparing and calling your bankers and asking them to get you as close to the front of the line as possible, because I think this is going to be, as I mentioned, absorbed very quickly.
Gary, can you explain just to everyone that in order for the SBA loan, they would have to have the S corporation or the LLC?
You know, I'm not positive on all the details, but I believe it's S corps, LLCs. It's virtually almost any structure. It's just capped at the number of employees, and the loan amount is capped at 10 million. But I don't think there's any structures that will be immediately eliminated from the possibility of getting this type of loan.
Right. So it's just if agents don't have a business entity structure, then they wouldn't be able to apply for the small business loan.
That's correct. There has to be some type of tax ID associated with the request. And that tax ID obviously would have to be structured through some type of corporation, whether it's an LLC, S Corp, or C Corp.
So just a question. Clayton has a question that's kind of tied to Eileen. Just let's talk about the practical aspect of, buyers trying to, say they can cancel deals. Number one, there are no force majeure provisions in these contracts. Act of God, you can't just snap your fingers and cancel a deal. I do feel that a buyer or a seller can delay a closing, for the foreseeable future until things clear up. But what happens in reality, right? First of all, all the deals we do pre-corona, 99.9% of deals close or get worked out, negotiated. Less than 1% of deals go to litigation. But let's say we have an aggressive seller in today's world. The seller has to serve what's called a time of the essence letter, right? Giving the buyer 30 days to close. And this has to be after the closing date already passed, right? So to give them a 30 days to close. The buyer's attorney and the seller says, listen, if you don't appear for the closing in 30 days, we're going to keep your deposit. The buyer's attorney simply writes an email rejecting the time of the essence, telling the seller's attorney, who's the escrow agent, they cannot touch that money, and the time of the essence is invalid. So if the seller in today's world, which is virtually impossible, wants to have a closing, they have to have a closing, show that they're ready, willing, and able to close, and then go to court and sue for the deposit. The courts are closed, as I said, except even landlord, tenant, and the Supreme Courts, except for emergency, purposes. I do think that the percentage of litigation will go up, because there's going to be some buyers that are going to try to make things difficult, even though they don't have much of a case. And it's really how aggressive the seller is. Think about the deal. I think, the higher level of deal, the more likely a seller will go to court, right? So say, for example, you have a $500,000 deal, $50,000 deposit, or $5 million deal, $500,000 deposit. It costs essentially the same. I'm not a litigator, but my understanding, say $10,000 to $20,000, $30,000 to bring a lawsuit, and go through the whole process. So clearly, if it's a $500,000 deal, the seller is in a much more difficult position to bring an action as opposed to a $5 million deal. Well, someone may happily spend $50,000 even to get $450,000, right? But as Clayton's kind of alluded to, it can kind of, the problem is you can list another apartment, but when you discuss negotiating a contract with buyer number 2 and you're in litigation with buyer number 1, you have to disclose it. So think about buyer number 2. They're going to be nervous, right? They don't know how it's going to end up. And it's going to be, it's going to put some hair on the deal. So you can, start listing it. I guess you should definitely speak with your companies about, any policies, since it's a unique concept. The buyers, listen, they can get aggressive and make things difficult. It just creates, a headache. So no one's snapping their fingers and keeping somebody's deposit. Nobody's, it's most likely the buyers that are pushing things out. Eventually, and what happens is we negotiate, right? Let's say a buyer they have a non-contingent deal, a cash deal, or the financing's gone and they can't close. It's a negotiation. It depends how aggressive the seller is. So again, it'll be a case-by-case basis, but most of these deals will be worked out. The average buyer who's just delaying because they want to delay, and is nervous about the uncertainty, we'll negotiate, and we'll close. Let's see what else. We just got a few questions emailed to us as well. If you have questions, and if you asked them when you came in to the sign-on email, you can put them in here as well, just to make sure we're covering everything.
In addition to that, both Andrew and Gary, we're going to email you a roster of questions that likely won't get discussed over the webinar today, and we'll have you guys thankfully answer those, and then we'll blast them back out to the group.
Okay.
One question came through is, can you apply for both the payroll protection program loan and also file for unemployment? I'm not sure that you could do both, but I would think they are two separate and distinct things. One is to keep your employees paid. Another one is to get paid yourself, right? So that's a question I frankly would ask my accountant. I don't know the exact answer to that. The accountants are going to be experts on that, as they have been educating themselves, or at least I know many of them that I've spoken with have educated themselves on the program. But I believe there also is a feature on the SBA.gov website where you can get that answer correct. The problem is the SBA has just finalized this last Friday. So a lot of this is a moving target. I think things are going to change day by day. So, you got to keep yourself abreast of what's going on, how it's changing, how it's developing. My guess is that number that I told you before, 349 billion, will be increased, because I think that, again, it's going to be absorbed so quickly that I think they're going to have no choice but to put in a bigger number there. But it remains to be seen.
So there's a couple things that have come through that I just wanted to address, a couple questions. First of all, just an update. And again, as long as everybody's getting their revenue emails, they would have gotten the email from Jim Whelan that just came in at 10:07. But basically, NYRAC jumped the gun on publishing that real estate agents were essential, and it has not been signed off by the governor yet. But obviously that's coming from somewhere. So we still do encourage you to speak up, but I can assure you that all the owner operators are all over it, that nobody feels that it is the right thing for New York City because of the proximity. It's not like we're out in the suburbs and have lock boxes on our listings. It's a totally different story, even though there's still risk at that. It's a different story. And then there's one other thing that people can apply for. It's the EIDL loan. So that might be something, and again, I don't know if the EIDL would also reduce your ability to also apply for unemployment, but that's something to consider. And the EIDL loan is something that there's limited amount of funds, I've been told, and that you should apply for that as soon as possible.
And that's the disaster loan that basically states that you have a complete loss of income. Any other questions? Anything coming through, Nick? Can't hear you, Nick. You're on mute. Still on mute.
Sorry. If we get checks from properties we put in contract months ago and the checks arrive now, can we still apply for unemployment? It's a great question.
That is not a question for me. That's a question. That's definitely a question for, I would say, your CPA. I don't know the answer to the unemployment and how that works. And I would assume if it's income that was earned a while ago, I would only be under the assumption that you still could, because it's not current income. Right. But again, I'm just guessing in that, so I defer to a CPA.
My CPA said yes, because currently we cannot work. So we have no ability right now to make a living or an income. and past commissions are passed. But
Great.
again, I agree, speak with your CPA.
Great. Wonderful. Gary, any additional updates from First Republic that you'd like to make?
I just wanted to tell everyone that we're completely in business. As I said earlier, we're working full days. I'm fully set up at home and fully functional and approving deals each and every day. I'm here for any of you. If you have any questions at any time, just shoot me an email or give me a call. I'm happy to walk you through any of the things I've discussed today, walk you through underwriting and what we're looking at, how we would structure a deal, and ultimately how quickly we can close. These are definitely unprecedented times, and they're times that people need to be creative and need to be able to think through deals. And I think that's really where First Republic will shine. So if there's anything I can do for any of you, please let me know.
Firmly agree. Thank you so very much, Gary, for lending your time and expertise today. Andrew, any final oh, sorry, go ahead, Heather.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so there were two things I just saw that came across. Jeremy said, Gary, can you send your contact info out? And then Clayton just said, curious if the reversal on our ability to show is correlated to brokers filing for unemployment. Clayton, I think it's speculative, but I think that's what a lot of people are jumping to. That said, agents across the country are able to show and have been deemed essential in other states. So the more likely and possible scenario is that NAR and NYSAR have been lobbying for this, and that is the source of it.
Yeah, so just wrapping up, I think a lot of us as professionals, and more specifically real estate professionals, will use this time as an opportunity to, increase our sphere of influence, increase our frankly business, to show our strength. People are looking out and seeking those with, confidence and strength and knowledge. It's opportunity, right? So all kidding aside, we do these meetings once a month. I host them, and usually we have 20, 25 of you come to the meetings. Today I'm speaking in front of 90 people, right? But for this issue, which is catastrophic and gut-wrenching, I would not be in front of 90 of you, right? So think about how this has created different opportunities for us, right? Some positive, some negative, but we got to embrace the positive and take control of it and use it to our advantage. And really, what can you do? Every day there has to be something you can do to, help somebody, and build your business and build a connection, and, use this time to reach out and be consistent, right? Every day, hopefully we're all working out, exercising, taking a walk, but, hopefully every day we're doing, these kinds of activities and educating ourselves and educating others. So, seize the moment. This is a real opportunity for all of us. We're all at the top of our game, and, you can get to a higher level over the next few weeks, next month or so.
Sure. So thank you very much for those remarks. Everyone, this remains a fluid situation, and as new information comes to light and we get and can confirm that new information, we'll make sure to schedule these meetings and get to the details you need so you can continue being successful in your business. Special thanks to Andrew and Gary and Brian for joining the meeting today and volunteering their expertise. Thank you for everybody who joined the meeting. Heather for organizing. Do not hesitate to reach out, everyone on the meeting, if you have additional questions. We're going to get the questions that were left unanswered over to our experts and have those blasted out to the group relatively soon. Stay safe, everyone. Thank you all very much, and we'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you.